Number 5. Mirror, mirror. Starting off this list, we arrive at somewhat of a tame curse. I mean, not tame, because I've hit nothing but red lights for the past month since I broke mine. We've all broken a mirror or two, haven't we? Little hand mirror here or there. Apparently breaking some melted liquid sand can get you in some pretty hot water. Almost everybody has heard of breaking mirrors. Pretty well dooms you to at least 7 years and of bad luck. We've all done it. It happens. Well, apparently it's an old curse. This one's origins begin in ancient Rome. The Romans believed that the human soul would renew every 7 years, repairing whatever damage they had suffered during that time. They also thought that a mirror's reflection was a way to look inside said soul. So what they thought was, if you break a mirror, you break a little bit of your soul as well, which would then again have to go through this 7-year cycle to renew and cleanse that bad aura right out of you. Yeah, do this for 7 years as your soul is reborn. You endure misfortune because of your imperfect, now shattered soul. Sounds like a bad breakup. Mirrors were not cheap either back then, and they were pretty low quality and easily breakable. In order to avoid negligence to the owners, it was also known that breaking a mirror and the whole 7 years of bad luck thing was also a simple scare tactic. I'm not making any more mirrors. You know how much work that is? Like, if you break it, you buy it, pal, and 7 years of bad luck too. I don't know, it's hard. These take a long time to make. Next time, just watch your hands, please. Number 4, St. Ans Well. As always, if you like what we do here at Top 5 Scary, hit us up with a like. A little spot my family likes to call home. Liverpool, England, and also one of the newest reasons that I'm never revisiting again. In 2016, archaeologists uncovered an ancient well near Liverpool that dates to the medieval era. Archaeologists say that they rediscovered a large sandstone well on a private farm in Liverpool. When archaeologists arrived at the site, there was barely anything of a well, as it had become completely filled with earth for hundreds of years. The cult of St. Anne was once a widespread medieval following. The mother of the Virgin Mary, Anne, is often associated with great and powerful healing wells. Anne supposedly bathed in the well, which was known for treating skin and eye diseases. Like OG LASIK, you know, just hop right on in, cataracts gone in a flash. Apparently for centuries, a priory of 12 monks tended to the well mid-16th century, and there was a huge competition and demand for this hot spring. The priory's father and his neighbor both claimed ownership. He's being snide, isn't he? He's being a snide one. Classic case of Darcy versus Delwaney. 2 days later, King Henry VIII shows up, and after all the talk with his men, they seized the well and both dudes lost out. Scouse luck, mates, go on, Scouse luck. Apparently lore goes, Delwaney cursed Darcy, and according to legend, Delwaney then dropped dead on the spot. Talk about karma, dude. Within 3 months, Darcy's son had passed away from unknown illnesses as well as Darcy losing his job. And a year later, Darcy was found at the bottom of said well. Despite the grim legend, the well continued to be used even after the lore had become widespread. It actually made it more popular. It was purposely buried, but then recently discovered, restored, and reinforced. I only do the wishing wells. You know, those are the only wells that I do. They're the nice kind. Number 3, the Knights Templar. Everybody knows about the superstition about the number 13. Supposedly unlucky. Dude, I lived on the 14th floor for like 3 years. Lights always flickered, always. Just saying. We're also familiar with the Friday the 13th being unlucky and not just a banger of a Halloween movie. But not a lot of people know where this 13 thing actually originates from. In the early 14th century, King Philip of France was at war with the English. There was this really rich group called the Knights Templar, and after funding King Philip's side of the war, he didn't really have any intention on paying them back. Yeah, you see, the Knights Templar had become a powerful organization in Europe. The most powerful. During the Crusades, King Philip needed supplies and revisions. Never intending to pay them back, of course, Philip doubled down, conspiring with Pope Clement V, who, on Friday, October 13th, 1307, led an ambush, seize, mass arrest of the Knights leader Jacques de Molay and all of his men. They were all charged and imprisoned. He was tortured, imprisoned, and burned at the stake. However, before dying, Jacques de Molay cursed both enemies, claiming that both Clement and Philip would be dead within the year and that their names would be forgotten. Clement succumbed to a fatal disease. Philip died of a stroke, like right after each other. By 1328, all of Philip's sons and grandsons had perished from rapid illness, and the curse had sprung true. Yeah, I wouldn't cross the Navy SEALs of the medieval times. Probably not a good idea. Now I got flickering lights because you two backstabbed a cult army for doing something nice for you? Shame on you. Number 2, the Pella Tablet. In 1986, archaeologists unearthed a cursed tablet during excavations of the ancient Macedonian capital of Pella. Archaeologists uncovered 1,600 Greek cursed tablets since then. However, the Pella Tablet is still by far the oldest, and apparently the most cursed. Created somewhere between 400 and 350 BC, the Pella Tablet is a letter to the gods asking them for help to curse a woman who stole her man's heart. And not like a sappy mixtape or anything, this curse is inscribed on lead scroll. It's metal paper. The writer, one who calls herself Dagina, calls upon divine powers from the gods to solve her problem. Her beloved, Dionysophon, is on the verge of marriage to another woman. Dagina wants him to herself, of course, and then asks the gods for some help. The language on the stone is so old that it actually predates the modern and ancient Macedonian language. These cursed tablets, or spell scrolls, were called katatismoi, or deficciones, and it was widely believed that they would continue to work and curse as long as the text and tablet existed. Basically, as long as there's batteries in there, it's gonna keep on cursing. James L. O'Neill from the University of Sydney interprets the translation of the ancient text as, quote, "Forbid by writing the ceremony and the marriage of Dionysophon and Thetima, and all other women, and widows and virgins, but especially Thetima. And I assign them to Macron and the Daemones. And whenever I shall unroll and read this again after digging it up, then Dionysophon may marry. But not before. May he not take any wife but me, and may I and no other woman grow old with Dionysophon. I am your suppliant. Pity me, dear Daemonis, for I am weak and bereft of all friends. But protect me so this does not happen and evil Thetima will perish evilly. But may I be fortunate and blessed." Whoa, for never was a story more woe than this of Thetima and her Dionysophon. I think it sounds better than Romeo and Juliet. What do you think? I mean, that's not very nice to wish there, Dagina. Kinda mean if you ask me, and very jealous. Also, Thetima, girl, you gotta split. This girl's out here looking for you. You're gonna catch some hands for talking to someone else's man. I'm just saying, you've been warned. Number 1, the Bjorktorp Runestone. Of course, the number 1 spot, Bjorktorp Runestone. I had to. I just did my ancestry and apparently I'm 12% Viking. Yeah, I just send my spit somewhere and they told me that. This specific cursed runestone is one of the many megalithic standing stones located in Sweden. This one actually is one of the world's tallest as well, measuring 4.5 meters high. It's part of a stone circle with 2 other blank standing stones. Scholars date the runestone's inscription to the 7th century AD. It's carved with a type of rune that form an intermediate version between the elder Futhark and the younger Futhark. The runestone is inscribed on both sides. The short message reads, "I foresee perdition," and the longer side translates to, "I, master of the runes, conceal here runes of power, incessantly plagued by maleficence doomed to insidious death. Is he who breaks this monument. I prophesy destruction." A little aggressive, bro, but I guess, they were Vikings, so aggression was kind of their thing. Local lore says that the curse came true at one point. Long ago, a man wanted to move the runestone so that he could have more room to farm, so he piled wood around it in an attempt to heat the stone and then crack it with water. As soon as he lit the fire, the man's hair lit aflame. His clothes were soon engulfed and the man perished right there next to the ruin. Yo, I would just avoid these at all costs. Like, no point should you ever be trying to move an ancient Viking cursed megalith. Again, unless you're Kratos helping Loki climb a mountain. Number 5, King Casmir IV. In the 1970s, 12 archaeologists opened a tomb in Krakow, Poland of unknown date. Somewhere around 500 years ago, they think. 1427, King Casmir Jagiellon IV. He grows up to become the Grand Duke of Lithuania in 1440, and then, eventually, King of Poland in 1447. Fast forward back to the 1970s. The Chapel of Wawel Castle. They find a wooden coffin basically rotten, and what remained were only sections of the king's decaying corpse. Spooky. But then 4 out of the 12 researchers who were working on exhuming the tomb passed away the following couple of days. Suddenly this seemed to be a repeat of a similar event that happened about 50 years ago. Yeah, at least a dozen researchers, either working on site or handling artifacts in a lab, began to experience severe health problems, even lethal. Yeah, Talk about cursed tombs. Holy moly. An agreement to examine the historical site was debauched for a while. Excitement for any kind of scientific research due to the strict government in the 1970s, you see. Cardinal Karol Wojtyla, this guy was a huge supporter of scientific research and already studying King Casimir's dad. He was responsible for the decision to open and study the tomb a few years later. And after that, a few years later, he becomes Pope John Paul II. Like, how awesome is that? Guy was woke back then. He was like, nah, science rules, we need to dig in. The story caught the attention of a nation. Before the burial site was exhumed, the archaeologists and citizens all joked that the tomb was cursed and those who continued should proceed with caution. And then 4 of them, well, yeah. I mean, numerous types of mold spores that cause potential health risks to humans if inhaled. This is like the Howard Carter case all over again. Most tombs in ancient sites contain a pathogenic fungus called Aspergillus flavus. Causes allergies, asthma, and likely fatality. Yeah, big stuff. Heavy stuff. Number 4, the Assyrian Tablet. As always, dudes, if you like what we do here at Top 5 Scary, hit that thumbs up button, alright? 6'1" height. That's how tall I am, and that's how tall our next curse is. But engraved onto a slab of basalt. 6'1", absolutely massive, and talk about heavy, too. Quote, whoever discards this image from the presence of Salmanu puts it in another place, whether he throws it into water or covers it with earth, or brings and places it in a taboo house where it is inaccessible. May the god Salmanu, the great lord, overthrow his sovereignty. May his name and his seed disappear in the land. Okay, yep, no, that's definitely a curse. Sounds like Rush lyrics, doesn't it? I feel like Geddy Lee wrote this. Written by an unknown author, inscribed onto an Assyrian tablet 800 BC. Ah, definitely not Rush then. And again, this thing is massive, but now, unfortunately, broken in 2. One half ended up in the hands of the British Museum and the other Bonham's auction house. Look, I understand private collectors are a thing, but like, can we just have like a non-biased, geographically neutral ancient library that we can all just collectively study? So many that's mine, no, that's mine. Sounds like kids fighting over this stuff, doesn't it? We're all just curious, we want to know. The fragment in the British Museum's collection was found in 1879 in Syria. It was formed in basalt to commemorate a military achievement of King Adad Nirari III. The British Museum has the top of the statue with the image of the knight's head portion. Again, this thing has gone through so many legalities about ownership, like, where did we find it? Who wrote it? The carvings show the rulers alongside sacred symbols, the winged sun disk of Shamash, the star of Ishtar, and the thunderbolt of the weather god Adad. The lower portion was put up for auction by a private collector in London in 2014, and in 2017, the bottom half made international headlines. Once again. This time it was at the center of a dispute between its former owner and the commissioner of the Metropolitan Police in London. The commissioner apparently was sued by a Lebanese antiques dealer after police confiscated the relic. Yeah, too much arguing for me. Like, just share it. Couple months here, couple months there. I don't know. Just get along so we can study the damn thing. Number 3, Polish King's Curse. In April 1931, in a crypt in Vilnius, ancient Polish queens and kings were found, but they were found with their crowns still on their heads. Yeah, cryptic stuff. It was a royal burial, you see. Described by those involved as the discovery of a century. Polish researchers didn't even know what they were in for. After a massive storm had flooded a crumbling cathedral in Vilnius, they threw down sandbags to preserve the artifacts, but on the night of April 25th, the water had won the battle and the chambers were completely flooded. They followed the water deeper and deeper to the lost remains of Polish kings and queens from the 15th century. Storm of the century, I'd say. Out of place and messy, but definitely royal nonetheless. The floating muddy remains of Queen Elizabeth Habsburg and Queen Barbara Radziwiłłona. Royalty. Not meant to be really floating around in the rainwater, you know? Now after these discoveries, that's when things get creepy. That's when the talks of a so-called curse began. Those involved in the findings began to die in unusual circumstances. Professors falling down elevator shafts, 2 having undisclosed medical issues, 1 professor becoming paralyzed in an accident, Professor Julius Klaus died from an unusual illness. Like, scary. Even a sculptor involved died when untying his shoelaces. That sort of stuff. Like creepy curse stuff. Even if you try and protect the remains of lost kings and queens and their history, even if you're involved, the curse apparently will get you. These curses are heavy, dude. These people were just trying to help and preserve this stuff, but royal curses are royal curses. Spooky stuff. Number 2, fairy forts. So apparently fairy forts in Ireland are a thing. A very respected and very old thing. This is awesome, and equally terrifying. Something about a big burly Irishman saying, "Oh, you don't go messing around them fairy mounds now, son." Like, that's horrifying. I'm surprised there isn't more indie Irish horror movies about these things. Serious business. More than 45,000 of them still surviving, and approximately 10,000 destroyed since the first large survey in the 19th century. In County Clare, locals protested the path was through an ancient fairy bush, or a fairy mound. So be careful if you live in Ireland, because apparently an ancient curse of Tara has been unleashed by the destruction of a fundamental ancient fairy fort. Traditional myth and local legend says interfering with fairies' homes is to risk your own life, with most believing strongly in the curse of Tara, the retribution of fairies on those involved in the disturbance of their natural home. In this case, the M3 motorway. Yeah, the N22 is the main road between Killarney and County Kerry and Cork, Ireland, otherwise known as the Emerald Isle. Associated with fairies for more than hundreds of years, dating back to the Iron Age and beyond, when the country was said to be under the power of the mystical Tuatha De Danann, a race of supernatural beings which were kind of like gods. In June 2007, Minister for the Environment Dick Roche signed an order destroying the Lismullen Henge. Lismullen Henge was a 4,000-year-old astronomical observatory and place of worship, once hailed as one of the most important archaeological finds of the century. And, of course, bad things followed. Surveyors held up by an armed gang, the Minister for Transport sucked out of a helicopter when the door mysteriously fell off, the Chief of Health and Safety Officer was struck by a falling tree. Hey, how about we listen to this ancient Irish lore and not around, huh? Also, it's a road. You can't build a little curve around a 4,000-year-old monument? Really? Come on, people. Number 1. Fiscius and Porcello. 2 cursed 1600-year-old lead tablets in the Museo Archeologico Civico di Bologna were recently deciphered. And one of them turns out to be one of the first known surviving curses directed at a Roman senator. That can't be good. This one's a juicy one. Well, these two, because it's a pair of lead cursed tablets. First off, how much must you have someone off before they get a big rock and start chipping and chiseling away at it for like 4 years straight? Like, if you're still mad after a day of chiseling rock or metal, it's serious. Usually a couple of deep breaths in about 5 minutes gets you over anything. But like, you know what I mean? Just anger. A drawing of a snake-headed deity, possibly Hecate, the goddess of the underworld, crossroads, and sorcery, with her arms crossed and a star carved over her. Although her name is not mentioned, the phrasing of the invocation is similar to the other curses that enlist Hecate and their dark curses. The crossed arms symbolize the binding of the deity to the curse. The goddess will remain bound until its terms are fulfilled. This is what it says. Quote, "Crush, kill Fistus the senator. May Fistus dilute, languish, sink, and may all of his limbs dissolve." Okay, it's a little harsh, no? The other lead tablet, cursing Porcello, has a little less violence, but still, yeah, pretty hateful. The cursed person's name Porcello and his wife Morelia. Same snake-headed deity with crossed arms, but this time, Porcello gets a drawing too. He's portrayed as a wrapped mummy with his arms crossed and his name written on both of them. Quote, "Destroy, crush, kill, strangle Porcello and Morelia. Their soul, heart, and buttocks, liver." Again, what did these people do? Like, liver? That's so specific. Unfortunately, we don't know where they came from. They were acquired by the museum in the 19th century, then forgotten about until about their rediscovery in 2009. The museum has no specific record of acquisition of the tablet's provenance. They could be anywhere from the late Roman Empire. Yeah, anywhere. The two curses, mainly written in Latin and inscribed on thin lead, would have been created by two different people in the late life of the Roman Empire. They both lay at the Museo Archeologico Civico in Italy. Yo, I don't want to get dissolved. People are saying dissolved a lot, you know? That's really harsh. This curses, man. Serious stuff.
Number 5 on this list is the Sacred Book of Abber Melon the Mage. This book was written by, and yep, you guys guessed it, Abber Melon. Abber Melon held a belief that every single person had their own unique personal demon within them. Kinda sounds like the guy who's been through a few rough breakups if you ask me. He believed though that even though we all had this personal demon, that it could be tamed and it could be controlled. Sort of like this inner power that you have that once you're capable of controlling, it will be very, very strong. If you have this inner demon tamed, then you'll be able to perform supernatural feats and abilities that the average human won't be able to do. That's basically what this book is all about. Taming your inner demon and learning to work with it so that you can harness that power. Then, once you've done so, this book will teach you what sort of powers you're able to perform. Now, this all sounds pretty legendary, actually. I think that everybody would love to be able to channel some magical part of themselves and perform supernatural feats. The book, as with many on this list, though, comes with a downside. If you have this book in your possession, then you're said to be haunted by spirits from another dimension. And these spirits will bring you horrible luck. Maybe if you channel your inner demon quick enough and then get rid of this book, it could be worth it, but something tells me that it's going to take longer than an afternoon to do that, which probably makes this book too dangerous to use. Number 4 on this list is the Arabetel. The Arabetel, or the Arabetel de Magia Veretum, is an ancient text that has some questionable things in it. Although the intentions of this book are good and it may have helped some individuals live a better life, there are dark things in here as well, and the better life can't be said for all people who use this book. Ancient Origins writes, the Arabetel is a Renaissance period grimoire and one of the most influential works of its kind. Unlike some other occult manuscripts that contain dark magic and malicious spells, the Arabetel contains spiritual advice and guidance on how to live an honest and honorable life. The Arabetel is said to have been written in 1575 AD. The author remains unknown, although it's been speculated that it was written by a man named Jacques Gohori. The focus of the Arabetel is on nature and the natural relationships between humanity and a celestial hierarchy. It centers on the positive relationships between the celestial world and humans, and the interaction between the two of them. The Arabetel was an extremely influential work for its time. So as we can see, this ancient text isn't inherently evil in nature, or at least that wasn't its initial intention. However, this book has been connected to some urban legends, and one copy of the text in particular is definitely cursed. It's believed that back in the 1600s, this book fell into the property of a young Polish farmer. The farmer grew obsessed with this book and the dark and malicious spells that it contained. He cursed his rivals and made it so that their crops would never grow. He turned into this evil warlock who the whole region feared. Even though they feared him, they weren't going to give up all hope. The people rose up and attacked this warlock farmer. They killed him, but before he died, he cursed his copy of the Arabetel so that whoever reads it will die within 60 days. Needless to say, the people weren't about to test this guy's curse out, and they hid the copy of the book away. Nowadays, nobody knows where it went, and it could still possibly be out there. So if you do ever pick up one of these texts and give it a read, then you're basically rolling the dice and just hoping that it wasn't that same copy that got cursed. Number 3 on this list is the Book of Soiga. The Book of Soiga is one of the most intriguing books on this list. Humans like things that are hard to come by, things that are rare and often valuable to us. Diamonds are beautiful, but it's actually the rarity and difficulty in finding the diamonds that make them as valuable as they are. Well, the Book of Soiga took a book from those precious stones, and it's definitely hard to come by. The style inspiration says, dating back to the 16th century, the Book of Soiga, also known as the Aldaria, is a Latin essay about demonology with only 2 known copies in existence. One was owned by the scholar John Dee, and his elder brother devoted his entire life to decoding the Book of Soiga. Though he successfully determined that the book was full of dark rituals and incantations, he struggled to figure out the final 36 pages. His obsession with figuring out the content of those final pages drove Dee to insanity. Obsessed, he even hired a medium to summon the Archangel Uriel to help with the translation. Speaking through Dee's medium, Uriel apparently explains that the book came into existence when Adam ended paradise and that it could only be interpreted by Archangel Michael. After Dee's death, the book was thought long lost until 2 copies were found in 1994. Since then, many have been tempted to try and complete these works, but it comes with a serious risk. According to legend, anyone who successfully deciphers those final pages is destined to die in under 3 years. So dying in 3 years obviously isn't the best, but the good part about this is because it's so rare, it's pretty unlikely to stumble on this book and give it a read. This is like a legendary Pokemon of cursed books though, so if you do ever come across it, don't read it, but definitely scoop it up and put that thing on eBay. In that case, the Book of Soiga might actually be a blessing. Number 2 on this list is the Lesser Key of Solomon. This book is so cursed that it doesn't even need to be read to curse you. Literally just being in its proximity can do the trick. Slapped Ham writes, the Lesser Key of Solomon, also known as the Clavica Solomon's Regis, is a cursed grimoire of demonology. Its original authors are unknown, and it's said to be comprised of texts compiled sometime in the 17th century. The book contains passages on how to conjure spirits of the dead and demons and how to control these entities to do your bidding. Curses and invocations also play a large role in the ancient text. Esoteric topics like how to become invisible and locate missing or stolen items are covered. Recipes for love potions and liquors of persuasion are also scattered throughout the book. This definitely isn't the book you want to own. It's reportedly so cursed that it will doom anyone who keeps a copy on their bookshelf. Those who've owned it have reported strange occurrences like pages turning on their own and books violently flying across the room. Strange whispers and shadow creatures have also been reported by owners of the manual. Owning the Lesser Key of Solomon is also believed to bring about catastrophic bad luck. It's said that the only way to break the book's curse is to burn the pages and properly dispose of the ashes. Finally, someone making some sense. How many times have I gone on this channel and talked about how we just need to start burning things? Cursed books, cursed houses, cursed objects. Screw all of it, let's just burn it. At the end of the day, this stuff is really cool, but I'm not out here trying to have my life ruined by some weird book. Burn it hot and let's be done with it. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Codex Gigas. Codex Gigas is one of the closest things that we have to a Bible for the devil. And anything that carries a weight to it like that needs to be on this list. The Style Inspiration says, at 92 centimeters, the Codex Gigas is the largest extant medieval illuminated manuscript in the world. Just like everything evil, it comes with 2 names, and the Codex Gigas' second name is more than a little foreboding: the Devil's Bible. The history of the book is heavy to say the least. It was written by a monk who had broken his spiritual vows, and for his crime, the monk was sentenced to die entombed behind a brick wall. The night before his death, the monk began chronicling everything he knew about the human experience in a book. So, the story goes, realizing he wouldn't have time to finish it, he apparently summoned Lucifer and asked him to complete the project in exchange for his soul. The book was then allegedly completed by the devil himself. It's overflowing with dark rituals and imagery, and even includes 19-inch drawings of the devil and other demonic entities. Now, obviously, because this was written by the devil, there are some side effects from reading the thing. People have reported watching their friends become possessed as they read it. Now, it's currently on display for people to go take a look at the National Library of Sweden. But be very careful if you ever do go take a look, because clearly, this is the work of the devil.
Number 5 on this list is the Untitled Grimoires. The Untitled Grimoires were written by a witch, and really not the type of book that you want to be reading before bedtime. Or actually reading at all for that matter. Digital Trends says, the Untitled Grimoires is a set of 2 handwritten, spiral-bound spell books sold by an online retailer for nearly $14,000 back in 2013. The books were handwritten in the 1960s by Persephone Adrasta Irene, a high priestess of Wicca who supposedly led her own coven. All 250 pages are filled with incantations, spells, enchantments, and details on how to summon spirits and demons. However, there was a serious catch. The seller warned buyers that any non-believers who messed with the books would bring a deadly curse upon themselves, while Persephone herself explicitly tells readers on the first page that proceeding with the book would have serious consequences. She wrote, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further, or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hand of the craft." So, literally anyone who can't perform dark magic already can't read this book and learn how to perform dark magic without dark magic coming and cursing them. Seems like a kind of a stupid way to get people to join your club, but I guess I'm not familiar with the ongoings of witches. Either way, there is no doubt that this book is deeply cursed. I can't imagine spending 14 grand on this thing unless you literally were already familiar with dark magic yourself, and I guess then you could make use of the book, but that's not me. People who have tried to read this thing have had some horrible tragedies befall them, so I highly do not recommend it. Number 4 on this list is Pseudomarchia Daemonum. Wow, okay, that was an absolute freaking mouthful, so I'm not going to be calling it that anymore because it's also called the False Hierarchy of Demons, and I'm going to be saying that from here on out. Ancient Origins says this is a great compendium from the 16th century dictating the names of 69 demons. The list initially appeared as an appendix to a book about demonology and witchcraft by Johann Weyer. The son of a civic service merchant, Johann Weyer was a Dutch doctor and occult practitioner born in the Netherlands in 1515. Well versed in Latin from a young age, Weyer quickly became a student of Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa, a famous magician, theologian, and occultist in Antwerp. It appears that Weyer's fascination with magic began while working under Agrippa, but later escalated after he became a doctor in his own right. He was summoned to a particular fortune teller's court case and thereby asked by the judge for advice on the topic. The court case started his interest in researching the witchcraft way of life, culminating with his decision to attempt to defend those who were accused of practicing. 27 years after this case, when Weyer was 62 years old, he published The False Hierarchy of Demons. This book, as with most that study demons, also talks about how to summon and control these demons. This book also focuses a lot on witchcraft too, something that became a deep obsession for Weyer. Definitely a book that you should avoid, and one that could hold some serious curses. Number 3 on this list is the ORS Notoria. The ORS Notoria is an ancient text which grants the person who studies it a perfect memory. Something that sounds great from the outside, but it isn't as cool as it's cracked up to be. Ancient Origins writes, as part of a larger collection known as the Lesser Keys of Solomon, the Ars Notoria is a book that is said to allow followers a mastery of academia, giving them greater eloquence, a perfect memory, and wisdom. The Ars Notoria is one of 5 books within the Lesser Keys of Solomon, an anonymous text that was compiled from other works in the 17th century and focuses on demonology. The Ars Notoria is the oldest portion of the Lesser of the Keys grimoire, dating back to the 13th century. However, the text contained within are a collection of orations, prayers, and magical words which date back to well before the 1200s. The prayers are in several languages including Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. It was not a book of spells or potions, but a book of prayers and orations that are said to strengthen and focus one's mental powers by beseeching God for intellectual gifts. Among these intellectual gifts is the concept of a perfect memory. Those who practice liberal arts such as arithmetic, geometry, and philosophy are promised a mastery of their subject if they devote themselves to the Ars Notoria. Within, it describes a daily process of visualization, contemplation, and orations intended to enhance the practitioner's focus and memory. So here's the thing, guys, that all sounds well and good and very useful, but I don't think that people understand what a perfect memory actually means. It means that there is literally nothing at any given point that you will ever forget. The license plate of that one car that cut you off, that one passing comment that the cashier said about the milk that you bought, the strange handshake that you had with your friend the other day. Literally nothing at all. You're not going to forget anything. Think about how much noise is going to be going on in your head at one given time if you can't forget anything. This is the curse of this book, and it's why a lot of people who have studied it in depth have lost their minds. If you're going to remember everything in the world, then there also needs to be a way to turn it off every now and again, to finally get some silence in your head. Sometimes forgetting things really is the best thing for us. Number 2 on this list is the Pickrick. The Pickrick is definitely a book that should be avoided, and it's mainly for how freaking grotesque it is. It was initially written in Arabic back in the 11th century, and it's a book that's centered around astrology and magic. It teaches the individuals who study it how to concoct crazy spells and make magical potions. What has thrust it into the limelight, as I mentioned earlier, is how freaking gross it is. The magical potions and the spells in here are just disgusting, and they're honestly plain wrong. Various body parts, various fluid from said body parts, and other weird stuff is regularly called upon in this text. The following is a literal passage from the book on how to make a spell. Take 4 ounces of the blood of a black dog, 2 ounces each of pig's blood and brains, and 1 ounce of donkey brains. Mix all of this together until well blended. When you give this medicine to someone in food or drink, he will hate you. And like, yeah, duh, if anyone blended up a bunch of brains and then gave it to me to drink, then I would kinda hate them as well. Many people think that this book is cursed based on the horrible spells in it, but it honestly might not be and could just be super weird. Either way, probably best to be avoided. And number 1 on this list is the Voic Manuscript. The Voic Manuscript is an illustrated codex that is handwritten in a writing system or language that no one understands. By using some advanced carbon dating, we can determine that it was made back in the early 15th century. We're pretty sure that based on the style of writing, artwork, and language that's in this book, it was most likely made in Italy. The manuscript contains 240 pages in it, and even though it was discovered a long time ago, no one has any idea what it truly means. This could be a good thing though, because the current prevailing wisdom is that whoever discovered exactly what this book says and means, they're gonna be cursed. Some think that this book has an ancient alien curse that's attached to it, and that it was dumped in Italy hundreds of years ago by said extraterrestrials. Others believe that there were some deep devil worshippers who made this book after finally making contact with the devil. Either way, so far we have no idea what it says, and if things maintain how they've been, we probably won't ever know. Which for a book like the Voic Manuscript, might actually be for the best.
In 5th place, we have Isla de las Muñecas, Mexico. So the Island of the Dolls in Mexico is like something straight out of a horror movie, but my kind of horror movie, or perfect place. Located on Texuelo Lake, it is home to hundreds of hanging, slowly decaying dolls, thanks to a man named Don Julian Santana. So over 50 years ago, Don Santana left his wife and child and moved onto an island on Texuelo Lake in the Xochimilco canals. I promise I tried to say it right. Let me know in the comments if I got it wrong. According to him, a young woman actually drowned in the lake in the 1950s, and he devoted his life to honoring this lost soul by collecting and hanging up dolls by the hundreds. Eventually, Don transformed the entire island into a doll-infested wonderland. So he began collecting lost dolls from the canals and the trash near his island home. He's also said to have traded produce he grew to locals for more dolls. But he didn't clean them up or attempt to fix them. He just put them up with missing eyes and limbs, covered in dirt and generally in whatever ramshackle state he found them in. Even when the dolls arrived to him in good shape, the wind and weather turned them into cracked and distorted versions of themselves, which I love. He also kept his cabin filled with dolls, which he dressed in headdresses, sunglasses, and other accessories as need be. So despite the fact that most people found this island frightening, he saw the dolls as beautiful protectors, as he welcomed visitors who he would show around, charging just a small fee for taking photos, just for upkeep and stuff. In 2001, Don Santana was found drowned in the same area, in which he believed that a woman had died. So according to legend, the dolls and the island are haunted by the spirits of the dead girl, and perhaps even by, Don himself. Alrighty, so after all that, who wants to go on a road trip with me? Anyone? Look, as long as we leave the dolls alone, I'm sure the curse won't follow us home. Okay, I'm 50% certain, but still. Let's go. In 4th place, we have Lam and Daxa in Dubrovnik, Croatia. So both of these places have such dark histories that I couldn't leave either of them out. They work so well together. One of them, Lokrum, is accessible by a regularly scheduled, kinda crowded, taxi boat, whereas the other, Daxa, has no links to the mainland and is actually avoided by locals. So legends and suspicions have surrounded this beautiful island of palm trees and pines since its long-term residents were removed in 1798. So settled on Lokrum since the early around 11th century, the community of Benedictine monks were evicted by Napoleon's troops. The night before their expulsion, the troops placed a curse on those who usurped the sacred ground. Half a century later, Habsburg Royal Maximilian, the younger brother of the Emperor Franz Joseph, bought Lokrum. He converted the monastery complex into his pleasure gardens, spending many a happy summer having exotic trees and plants planted and colorful birds imported. He later met his end by execution, even though close friends tried to give him an escape that he didn't accept because, get this, he felt shaving his beard to disguise himself would undermine his dignity if he were to be recaptured, which, I think that tells me plenty about his character. Oh, and from the exclusive beach bistro of the 5-star hotel, Daxa is usually just referred to as another, splash of green in an idyllic panorama of islands that tends to hang out. And if you're looking at the map, Daxa is pretty close, you could almost swim there. But the dotted lines around it kind of indicating sailing routes that really avoid it on purpose, skirting around to just avoid it no matter what. So kind of like Lokrum, in medieval times Daxa was first inhabited by monks, although later well-to-do travelers ignored it, preferring the larger, more accessible island to relax. In October of 1944, partisans were expelling pro-German Nazi forces from great swaths of what would become post-war Yugoslavia, and they arrived in Dubrovnik. Rounding up hundreds of sympathizers, including the city's mayor and local priests, they then took a certain number over to Daxa and executed executed them. Citizens were warned not to look for their loved ones in any case because there were no graves or burial plots. Dubrovnik simply got on with being part of Yugoslavia, and Daxa was never visited. If it was discussed, the talk turned to ghosts and the bad spirits that haunted the island. And in 2009, someone stumbled on the remains of several bodies. Forensic investigation revealed that there were 53 adult males, some carrying religious items associated with priesthood. A plot was created for reburials and a memorial erected. But even today, very few people visit Daxa, and it's abandoned and pretty much overgrown, so its secrets are hidden, and I'm good. In third place, we have Dead Man's Island. Even though it's kind of close to the public, Dead Man's Island is home to ghostly lore that is centuries old, so of course I had to talk about it. The list of spectral sightings and strange phenomena grows by the year, ranging from loud clanging noises that ring out in the dead of the night, to hurried footsteps that pace back and forth, or the unearthly moan of a young woman's sobs that fill the air. Tales of supernatural encounters stretch back more than a century, so the Squamish people call the place the Island of Dead Men. And a very long time ago, it said it was the site of a fierce battle. We're talking like northern and southern nations fought over claims to this plot of land. Now, the southern nation kidnapped 200 women, younglings, and elders from the north and held them captive. But when 200 young northern warriors traded themselves for the hostages' freedom, they were cut down on the spot. In the 1860s, the government offered to sell the land to one Samuel Brighouse. He declined the offer, but one of his partners, John Morton, decided why not. He rode to the island where he found hundreds of red cedar boxes scattered, amongst the foliage and perched in the upper branches of the tree, and quickly discovered they were fragile. When he reached up to touch one of them, it had crumbled above his head, showering him with the bones of its long deceased inhabitant. Yeah, nope, that's when you run for the hills and say, no thanks. In the 1890s, a plague descended upon Vancouver, and Dead Man's Island was used as a pest house. So those who fell ill were sent to the island for quarantine. And if they got better, they were allowed to return home. If not, they never left. From 1899 to 1930, this island was home to a logging dispute. Local authorities and residents alike were kind of outraged by it, and at 6:30 a.m. on April 24th of 1899, when the developer headed out to the island with 30 men, then Mayor James Garden brought almost the entire police force with him to the island. When the developer attempted to cut down a tree, he and his men were arrested. Now, several similar episodes dotted the decades until the lease expired in 1930. In a 1909 incident, police occupied the island overnight to keep loggers at bay, and claimed they heard the rattling of dead man's bones and shrieking skeletons that threatened to haunt anyone who dared cut down trees on the island. The island is home to too many bodies to count. First Nations people, British merchant sailors, early pioneer residents of Moodyville, Hastings Sawmill and the Granite Town site, Canadian Pacific Railway workers who died during construction, victims of the Great Vancouver Fire of 1886, those who succumbed to smallpox, and possibly some of the squatters who made the island their home for many years. No. Absolutely not. That's way too many dead bodies for my liking. Way too many spirits and angry ghosties. Absolutely not. In second place, we have the island of Poveglia. So the island is located in the lagoon near Venice and is famous for being one of the most haunted places in Italy. Tourists and locals alike are banned from this place, which was used for centuries as a place to exile the sick to prevent the spread of disease and, contain the mentally ill in an asylum built in the late 1800s. Yes, I'll backtrack and elaborate, and it's kind of similar to Dead Man's Island, but worse. In 1348, the bubonic plague arrived in Venice and Poveglia, and like many other small islands at the time, it became a quarantine colony. The plague on average killed like 1 out of 3 Europeans, and fearing the spread of the disease, Venice exiled many of its symptom-bearing citizens there. So if you sneeze, off you go. At the island's center, the dead and those too sick to protest were burned on giant pyres, and now this includes the tens of thousands of citizens dying on the mainland. And those fires would burn once more in 1630 when the Black Death again swept through the city. The small island was used as a mass burial ground, and ashes from human remains make up as much as 50% of the island's soil. Grapes, I hope it's a good fertilizer. The deaths of nearly 160,000 people on the island have given it its nickname, the Island of Ghosts. Now, a doctor at that asylum that I mentioned a moment ago was known to have experimented on patients with, crude lobotomies, and he jumped from the bell tower in the 1930s after claiming he had been driven mad by ghosts. I wonder why. You torture people and they're gonna haunt you in the afterlife? Go figure. Decades later, nearby residents claim to still hear the bell, even though it was removed many years earlier. A report titled Haunted History states that some restoration work had started in recent history, but abruptly stopped without explanation. Okay, maybe this is one spot on today's list I don't want to visit. And in first place we have Bell Island. So time to travel to Newfoundland, Canada. But more specifically, the claustrophobic rocky mining tunnels. So there's a sense of miner spirit watching from every corner and crevice in this world, where the shadows flicker and the darkness, it's just heavy. So between when the mines opened in 1895 and the last mines closed in 1966, there were 106 fatalities and, triple those accidents. Miners lost arms, legs, some were left disfigured, while others died of lung disease. No big. Heritage Newfoundland and Labrador reported in 1938 that a methane gas explosion in the number 6 mine killed 2 men and injured several others. In the 1950s, with the implementation of more powerful and faster machinery, miners were often killed or wounded by runaway ore cars and falling debris, to name just a couple of disasters. At the start of the mining, men wore felt baseball hats with the only light flickering from the dull glow of a candle on top and a tin lamp burning seal oil perched on a rocky ledge. Safety improved by like a smidgen around 1911 with the introduction of carbide lamps. And in 1935, miners wore battery-powered electric lights. But before all those great improvements, miners had no proper bathrooms or eating facilities, there was no warmth, and they worked like 10 to 12-hour shifts for 6 days a week for 5 to 7 cents an hour, seeing the sunlight only on Sundays. Okay, that sounds like me, but I swear, I do take a day off. Boys as young as 10 worked alongside men as old as 80, picking ore off the conveyor belts, separating the trunks by size and discarding the waste. The site contained 4 major underground mines called Number 2, 3, 4, and 6, which I've already mentioned, and they ran about, 3 to 5 miles in length. And then on the surface, there were 2 more mines called the Number 1 and the Number 5 that were mined out before, going underground. And what's left of the Number 4 mine, folks have heard muffled disembodied whispering, felt an icy wind rush past, footsteps, and often there's a dreadful feeling of being watched. Now, the most unfriendly character to roam the area is not a long-dead miner entering or leaving the tunnels, but a vengeful white woman. So women back then were considered to bring bad luck if they entered a mine, or even walked onto the mining site. Yeah, I can vouch for the fact that miners, similar to actors, can be very superstitious people. Remember, I'm from a Canadian gold mining town myself. Now, the white woman began to appear in the 1940s. And remember how I mentioned the mines didn't have running water? Yeah, the men would collect buckets from a well. So one day when the men went to collect water, and to their horror, discovered the body of a young woman, dressed in all white, floating in the well. Her skin had turned an icy blue in, the post-mortem state, and shortly after removing the body from the well, mine number 4 became a hub of paranormal activity. Men that were heading home after a long shift would get fiercely attacked by this woman. And wounded, they got treated at the nearby hospital, and those events would happen until about the mid-1960s, after the discovery of the killer. Well, the turn of the 19th century dispelled many of the long-standing myths and legends that were once pretty common on the island. In some cases, they actually got replaced with all new supernatural horrors. Bell Island has been labeled the most haunted island in North America. So, moving forward, in the early 20th century up until the 1950s, the island had a blend of ethnicities. We're talking like English, Irish, Scottish, German, and more. And they've all got their own superstitions as well. Before Newfoundland joined Canada as a province, it was a lawless place, filled with sailors, stowaways, misfits, and, the folklore got really mixed with the macabre. Wherever you found a piece of land, you planted your home, and there's a lot of things that happen that people still can't explain. What was I forgetting? Oh right, I almost forgot about the fairies. Once there was a man on Bell Island who actually disappeared for quite some time, and when he returned, he was totally different. He suddenly developed a serious speech impediment and walked hunched over with a cane in a jerky, unstable fashion. So the rumor was that the fairies took him. And hey, at the time, most of the community gossiped about this. According to locals, it's very common in old Newfoundland stories that if people have some kind of interaction with fairies, they're changed as a result. People in Newfoundland will also talk about a blast, where they will get an injury of some kind, like, they'll trespass on fairy ground, and they'll be struck with the fairy arrow, and then they'll get a boil or a lump or something that's going to form on their body. And when that lump is cut open, things such as feathers and twigs are going to come out of that wound. And with what I know about fairies, this is officially the scariest curse on the list. They're very much something one does not mess with. Trust me,